the mind towards the recognition of basic facts of life, most particularly change and impermanence, because this is a liberating perception, recognizing the unpredictability of phenomena, the unreliability of experience, the contingent nature of everything. This is initially difficult for many people because we like to feel that everything is very solid, and that's our refuge and our consolation in difficult times. Well, at least this is solid, this is reliable, this person, this situation, and so on. So we seek for that sense of solidity and reliability, and hopefully we try to provide that and to give that as a gift to the people around us, the sense that we're reliable and trustworthy and so on. But in meditation practice, we're constantly reminding ourselves of the limits of that reliability and trustworthiness of situations and people, and not, as it were, putting all our eggs in one basket and realizing that change is the very essence of life, and change can take place in predictable ways, in step-by-step kind of process. Change can also take place exponentially. Change can take place overnight or in a matter of seconds. And after a period of very small incremental changes, very large change can take place, or a huge change can be followed by very small, almost insignificant changes. The variations and the patterns of change are huge, but recognizing that and bringing it to mind is a way of maturing our mind and our heart. So, for instance, in relationships with loved ones, those around us, we constantly remind ourselves this is an impermanent relationship. Sooner or later, we're going to be separated from each other, whether through death or through some other means, or it might be an emotional separation. Some people, when they first know each other or when they first get married, feel a real sense of harmony, of purpose, and identity of ideals and so on, then grow apart until they suddenly wake up one day and they're going quite separate ways. So there's that sense of grief and loss of people who are still living together. So that change may take the place of becoming more and more intimate, more and more warm, or it might be the opposite way, a moving apart. And then the changes that come about through ill health, the changes that come about through the aging process. So what the Buddha is saying is that the spiritual practice is one in which we awaken to, bring attention to the very simple, basic, everyday experiences of our lives, and allowing our mind to learn from those experiences, because the facts of change, the different kinds of change, the different rates of change, they all have implications for us. If we're wise, then we can gain great advantage from this. For instance, if we reflect on the uncertainty of the time that we still have together, as families, or as husbands and wives, fathers and mothers and children, then we can see the value of that time, and we can see how sad it would be to waste that precious time in petty arguments and squabbles and victories and defeats and all the little ways in which we make ourselves unnecessarily uncomfortable and make life difficult for those around us. When often we act as if we're going to live forever, and that it doesn't really matter if we get upset with each other and quarrel and so on, because there'll be enough time to work it out sooner or later. But we have no guarantees. So the Buddha taught us to look on everything, all material goods, as borrowed goods. Everything we have is not truly ours. It's something that we've borrowed from nature temporarily. And that includes our bodies. We've borrowed the elements of the bodies, of our bodies, from nature. These bodies are created through natural elements existing in this world. They're sustained through food, through oxygen, and so on and so forth. And that sooner or later will be separated from them. So the idea here is that as we allow the kind of thinking which just goes round and round and round unnecessarily over regrets of the past or good memories of the past, looking for some kind of consolation and some interest and distraction from memory and imagination and distraction, the extent to which we are willing to let go of that kind of thinking gives the opportunity for inner space, inner peace, but also allows the thinking processes which are still there, which are preserved, lead to increased happiness and understanding. And we begin to see certain things more clearly. There are 5 things the Buddha suggested or said that the wise person needs to understand. One is the way that things arise, and the second is the way that things pass away. And the Buddha said that anyone who has an annihilationist view or a materialist view of life can be educated out of that by closely observing the way things arise in his mind or her mind. Similarly, someone who has a belief in eternal heaven, eternal hell, and so on, will abandon that view through closely observing the way that things pass away from their mind. So the idea is that nihilism, annihilationism, eternalism, these kinds of philosophical positions are based upon a lack of awareness of the way things arise and pass away in the mind. And direct experience of the way things are is the way to develop a clear understanding of life. The negative emotions are what we call defilements, which are to be abandoned, all exist in our mind because we want them to be there. there has to be that sense of acceptance and indulgence on one level or another. So the Buddha said he suggested that we look, what is it that we actually feel we get? What is it that we like about these things? What is it that makes us unwilling to let go of them? Let's take the example of anger, for instance, or aversion. Why is anger so difficult to abandon? Well, there we can see firstly certain ideas, beliefs. One is that anger is part of who we are, is part of our personality, it's something that makes us who we are. So there's a kind of conceit present, or else we enjoy the feeling of power that comes through anger. If we find that people don't listen to us generally, but when we're angry that we can get our own way, then that's part of the charm of anger for certain people, that sense of importance and the weight it gives us. And people feel that without anger we wouldn't ever battle against injustice, that anger is channeled well is what leads to social justice or the overcoming of evil in the world. So there are various kinds of ideas which being present in the mind will mean that anger will not be abandoned. Then, so some of them are intellectual, some of them are emotional enjoyment of anger. Now the Buddha says we need to be conscious of that, and the next thing to be conscious of are the drawbacks, and the way of analysis is such that you need to come to the point where you see that the cons outweigh the pros, and where it's not worth it, in other words. And so we begin to observe the effects of anger. If we get angry, it's harmful for our physical health. When we're angry, our understanding of situations tend to be very coarse. We censor a lot of information, that which doesn't uphold the anger or will undermine the anger. We tend to see things in a very black and white kind of way. We tend to demonize people, overemphasize the negative aspects of people we're angry with, and overlook or dismiss the positive elements. When we're angry, we often act and speak in ways which we feel ashamed of afterwards, or which also don't provide the results which we hoped for. And when someone is angry, they can be violent and can create very bad karma, for instance. And so we reflect on the pleasant and desirable aspects of a phenomena and its drawbacks. And in the case of defilements, if we can see clearly that the drawbacks far outweigh the benefits that we feel that we've accrued, then we are ready to do the work of abandoning the defilement. So this path of practice is one in which we're using our reflective capacity in harness with the qualities of attention and focus that we develop in meditation, to the extent that we can see anger as a phenomena, a conditioned phenomena, as not self, not belonging to self, something which arises according to causes and conditions, passes away according to causes and conditions, and then we can start the work on the causes and conditions and preventing them from arising. So this is a very practical approach to making real and lasting changes in the quality of our life, or observing things that happen or are present is always easier than observing things that are absent, and that's an extra dimension or something that we need to observe. But it is also vitally important. For instance, in the meditation practice, when the mind reaches a certain level of focus and clarity and awareness, then there is the realization of the absence of certain negative mental factors which usually cloud and distort awareness. There's sensual desire, aversion, sleepiness, dullness, boredom, agitation, doubts, and so on. And it is the realization of the absence of these negative mental states which gives the mind, imbues the mind with a sense of rapture, which is something which carries the mind to the next level of meditation. So this is a very important mental exercise, not always just to look for what's present, but what's absent. There's actually, this is not too trivial, I'm reminded of a joke, so I'll tell you a joke. It's not, it is connected with the discourse, and it's about Sherlock Holmes and Watson. And they go on a camping trip, and in the middle of the night Sherlock Holmes wakes up Watson, and he says, "Watson, look up and make some deductions." And Watson looks up and he says, "Well, the particular shape of the moon leads me to believe it's about the 13th day of the waxing moon. Yes, and the clouds scudding across the face of the moon suggests that the wind is in the northerly direction. The position of the moon tells me that it's probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. Yes, but what's the basic deduction you're missing here, Watson?" And so Watson says, "I don't know." And he said, "What is it, Sherlock?" And he says, "Someone's stolen our tent." Because the very fact that he could see the moon and the stars was because of the absence of the canvas. The point here being that it's not just looking and being observant and being awake to what is present, but what is not present. And in the case of precepts, for instance, it's not just what is not present, what is present, but what is not present also plays a part. For instance, if, for instance, one keeps the 5 precepts and refrains from drinking alcohol, taking drugs, then we can say many people have problem with this, and it doesn't see quite the necessity of it. If we're not drinking to get drunk, of course, and just for social benefit or relaxation or so on. But if we have a goal of wakefulness and inner freedom, and we start looking at our mind and we notice and we see how difficult it is to free our mind of its conditioned responses and its defilements and so on, how much of a struggle it is, then we want to avoid any kind of activity which is making it harder than it is already. So if one's taking alcohol or any drugs, it's not just that that one is not becoming drunk, or that there's just a sort of pleasant feeling of relaxation, therefore it's all right. But it's when it's seen in relation to this inner path of freedom, and seeing that one is increasing, at least to some small degree, the power of the lack of inner freedom. One's never really learning how to deal with, for instance, inner tension, lack of ability to relax, and so on, rather than developing this inner means and inner resources to deal with those kinds of phenomena. One has a way out, which is leading one away from the higher goal of spiritual practice. So it's not that having a beer or having a glass of wine is an evil thing, you know, you can go to hell or anything like that. It's more, what are your goals? You know, if you don't have a goal of developing mindfulness and awareness and inner freedom, then it's a negligible thing. It's not a big deal at all. But if you do have that inner goal, and it suddenly becomes something that you don't want to have anything to do with, because it's so difficult already. Why handicap yourself anymore? So this ability to reflect and to see very clearly the causes and conditions for progress on the path and the causes and conditions for regress, this interest in experience, interest in happiness and unhappiness, pleasure and pain, the kinds of activities, the speech, the ways of thought which lift and clarify and brighten the mind, the ways of thinking, the ways of talking, the ways of acting, which darken and cloud and weaken the mind. It's through that constant interest in experience that we draw certain conclusions, and we start to find ourselves acting in different ways than we used to act, and having different values than we used to have. And so it's not coming from a book and telling you, you should this, you should that, you know, if you do this you're bad, if you do that you're good, but it's more an encouragement to look and to learn from what's going on, because we do have this capacity to learn and to see for ourselves what's going on, what this conditioning process is, how it works. And so the kind of faith that arises in Buddhist teaching is a faith based upon putting the teachings to the test, reading, hearing Buddhist teachings and saying, does that make sense to me? Look at my life, look at my mind, look at my experience, and say, is that right? And the Buddha said, you know, don't take anything you know, as gospel. Don't believe in anything 100%, even if it's the Buddha's words himself. But take them and look at them. Don't accept them too easily. Don't reject them too easily. But put these frameworks for reflection into effect and see what happens. So that's my discourse this afternoon.